Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter. I am your host, Thais Sky, international speaker, teacher, and a certified life coach currently working to become a licensed psychotherapist in the state of California. Join me here every week as I offer thoughts and interviews on what it means to reclaim your humanness in this messy world. Hello, everybody. Thais Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim the podcast. I'm really excited about this episode. I bring on Haley Goodrich, who is a registered dietitian who takes a health at every size perspective in her work. She is also certified in working with eating disorders, and we talk about navigating food and weight gain during the pandemic. Because if you're on the internet at all, you'll see, I think, two large narratives right now. First narrative, increase in drinking alcohol. I mean, pretty much everywhere, all the memes, all the jokes, all the things, all of it implies drinking alcohol as a way to get through this time. And then the other thing that I see a lot of, actually there's three things, because I see a lot of conversations about productivity. I mean, but that's all the time. But there's definitely that special camp of people right now who are like, write a book, and this is your time to shine and be the most productive you've ever been in your entire life. Which is like, we're going through a global pandemic right now. It's kind of like when we take a sick day, and because we're sick, right? We have the cold, the flu, we're not feeling well, and yet we're expecting that like during that day that we have a day off, that we should be exercising and, project managing our lives and cleaning out a closet. No, what you should be doing on a sick day is sleep and rest. Your body needs it. That's what a day off. That's why you took a day off from work, right? So it's kind of that same thing where it's like, well, we're actually going through a really mental health challenging experience right now where it's very, very stressful on the nervous system. It's very stressful on our bank accounts. It's just a stressful time in society. And so the idea of like, let's now also be super productive just feels counterintuitive to what I think we're all craving, which is to actually give ourselves rest. Okay, so there's three narratives. So there's the alcohol intake, there's the productivity, and then there's a third narrative, which is the fear of the weight gain, and the obsession with exercise. And because all the gyms are closed, how are you going to continue exercising? And how are you going to prevent yourself from snacking and doing all these things to gain weight? Because gaining weight is equivalent to what? To like the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. At least that's certainly how so many people I know have a perspective on weight gain. Like weight gain is the worst thing that could happen. It's worse than cancer. It's worse than death. Like weight gain means that you're gross and ugly and disgusting. All of these comments that are extremely fat phobic and imply that there's something inherently bad and wrong about weight gain. When, first off, if like the worst thing that's happening to you right now is that you're gaining a little bit of weight, like that's a tremendous amount of privilege. And also, our body is allowed to fluctuate with what is happening. When we're in extreme stressful environment, it makes sense that our body is going to want to gain weight. That is okay. There's going to be other periods of time where you're going to lose weight. That's okay. None of it is a moral stand of who you are in the world or what you're worth in the world or how healthy you are in the world. And I think that that's really important for us to hold so tenderly, that weight gain, the weight of your body is not equivalent to who you are, your worth, and what you're allowed to take up space in this world. As someone who has recovered from eating disorder and who used to think that like if I didn't obsess over weight, if I didn't obsess over what I ate, if I didn't track and monitor everything I ate, then I would spiral into feelings of out of controlness. It took so much work to get out of that place. And there's so much freedom on the other side. There's so much freedom in this idea that you don't actually have to spend your life calculating what you're eating and how much you're eating. And is this too much? Is this too little? This feels too much. Or I feel fat. I feel gross in my body. It's wild because I used to think that that was a real feeling. I used to think that feeling gross in your body was a real feeling. And that if I ate too much, I would feel gross in my body. period. That's the fact. But now, having gone to the other side of that, I can eat a lot of food. For whatever reason, there's something really delicious happening. I want to just consume all the things. I eat so much food. I feel so stuffed, and I don't feel quote unquote fat or quote unquote gross. I just feel full. Isn't that wild? It's possible to just feel full and not have that feeling be equivalent to gross, out of control, disgust. Another feeling that I know a lot of us who are navigating this stuff is this idea of I feel heavy. I feel like I weigh a lot. Actually, though, you can't really tell when your body weighs more or when it weighs less. Of course, I'm talking about a specific frame. But this idea I ate an ice cream bar and now I feel heavy. Now I feel like weight, like I have so much weight on me. That's actually still not really a feeling. These are all ways that we've attempted to actually not feel. Yeah? There is another possibility where you eat an ice cream, you eat whatever, and there's no judgments. It just feels fine. Maybe your body will have a response to something that it doesn't really like eating. That's okay. It doesn't have to have a moral stigma. It doesn't have to have this whole thing attached to it. It's possible. It's possible because I'm living it. It's possible because so many people I know that have gone through the other side are also living it. And that's why I love this conversation with Haley. Haley has gone through it too. And she's now in the trenches supporting people on the dietitian side of things navigate tending to and healing eating disorders. And I love her work so much. And we get very fiery and passionate. We clearly have a lot of strong opinions here because we've seen it all. I mean, I've seen it all, y'all. I don't live in a bubble. I used to be a health coach promoting weight loss. Okay. I've been there. I used to be obsessed with going to the gym and work out 2-3 hours a day. All of these kind of disordered, broken ideas of health, I've participated in it. I am now at the other side, and not only does my body feel how it feels, it's more nuanced. It's not that it just feels good or feels skinny. It's nuanced. I have different feelings in my body. Not only is that more possible, but also in that my body can be more delicate in informing me of what's happening without automatically going towards food. I hope that makes sense. I love this conversation with Haley. I think it's very poignant right now. I think during a pandemic, while we're all kind of confronted with some of our shadow stuff, I think it's inevitable that food and weight gain is going to come up. And I love to open the conversation up for you all. So however way you're feeling, whatever is coming up for you around food and body, reach out to me, email me at info@thaissky.com. I would love to hear it. The more specific I can get, I can answer those questions on air and support you in navigating through it, because a pandemic doesn't necessarily have to equal a backslide of disordered eating. It doesn't have to equal more control. We can find different ways to regulate and tend to ourselves. It doesn't include obsessing over body, obsessing over weight. Wherever there is that obsession, there's probably something going on underneath, and that requires a lot of space and a lot of tending to, so that it doesn't paralyze us. Yeah. So email me if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer it on air. Let's get into this interview with Haley, and I will catch you all at the end. Okay, we are live. Hello, Haley. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Thais, for reaching out and having me on the show.
Absolutely. I reached out because I am such a big fan of your work. I love your presence online, and I think the conversations that you elicit are really important. And when I was, thinking about everything that the world is kind of going through right now with COVID-19, I just know that we need to be having more conversations about this topic. So I'm really glad that you were on board. And so before we get into the topic, why don't you share a little bit about yourself for people who are not familiar with you or your work?
Yeah, thank you. I am a registered dietitian in private practice. I have a group private practice here in Pittsburgh. We specialize in eating disorder recovery, intuitive eating, body image, weight inclusive medical nutrition therapy, all from a health at every size perspective, which if that's language that your community and audience is not familiar with, we can possibly go there later.
Sure.
Basically what that all means is we help to guide clients away from disordered eating, whether that's a clinical eating disorder or chronic dieting behavior. And we help them move toward behaviors that are more peaceful and out of a place of self-care and body acceptance and eating competency. So that's what I do on the one-on-one individual client work. I'm also a clinical supervisor for other dietitians and do a lot of advocacy work within our profession. Yeah, I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Really impressive, really amazing things that you're doing. You know, we have talked about health at every size on the podcast before. I think it's a really important concept that's going to ground our conversation. So why don't you give your thoughts on what health at every size and diet culture and all of that language mean for you?
Sure. I'm going to try and feel like this is something that could be talked about for a couple hours. I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. But if we think about the way we approach health, we can think about health at every size as sort of the big umbrella. And really that is an approach that some of us practitioners use. It's an alternative to the weight-centric, which is the normal approach. Weight-centric means focusing on weight loss as the sole means to health, happiness, that sort of thing. So this is an alternative to that. It's grounded in social justice work. It creates inclusive and respectful community and supports people of all sizes in finding compassionate ways to care for themselves. So sometimes the title health at every size can get twisted into a bunch of different meanings if you're not familiar with the approach itself and the principles. So it does not mean we believe everybody is healthy at every size, or that any size, no matter what, everybody's healthy. It's none of that. It's not a way to just not take care of yourself. Kind of none of those. I see a lot of that kind of misinterpretation out there. So again, it's just that all people, all humans deserve to have adequate and accessible care and to take care of themselves in a compassionate way without the focus being on weight specifically.
Yeah.
So it also helps to end weight discrimination and promotes size acceptance. So it is rooted in the fat acceptance movement of the 1960s. Yeah. Hayes has 5 core principles: weight inclusivity, health enhancement. So it is very much still about health, if that is a priority for the person or something that they want to make a value of theirs. It's about respectful care, eating for well-being, and life-enhancing gentle movement. That's a little bit about Hayes. And then some of it's kind of the umbrella that protects our clients from, you could imagine these lightning bolts on top of the umbrella. And those things would be like weight bias and not having access to care, and things like fat phobia and diet culture would all be sort of what the umbrella is protecting folks from, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I struggle with, and I would love to know your thoughts on this, I'm pretty vocal about the fact that I've recovered from eating disorder and I'm very much continually having conversations about what it means to live in your body and what does it mean to live a life that is intuitively mine. And I keep getting hung up on the word healthy.
Yeah, same. Actually, me too.
What is healthy? What is unhealthy? I mean, why is this piece of food item healthy and this piece of food item not healthy? Who determines that? What is healthy determined by? And then when we obsess with health and caloric intake, how unhealthy are we then making the mind?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the way we use that term healthy is largely informed and defined by diet culture itself. So a very large oppressive system that is making billions of dollars a year. So they're able to use that language and sort of twist it in a way to say, like, use our product and we can give you longevity in your life. We can cure whatever it is you have. We can make you like your body. And so it's been twisted and co-opted into something that feels pretty yucky for me too. It's not a term I actually like to use. And I'm not even sure, and this is not even a guess or an opinion, this is a fact, that health isn't even accessible to everyone. And health also occurs on a spectrum, right? So if we are to say that only healthy people deserve X, Y, and Z, well, we're leaving out a ton of people, right? That's very healthist. That's very ableist. We're leaving out people that have chronic conditions, none of these which are anyone's fault. We live in a broken healthcare system as well. So I think, to tout health as this, if you do it right, if you show up right and you eat the most organic foods, yada, yada, and caveat, I don't really have a problem with organic foods, but you get what I'm saying. Then you get this trophy called health if you just do it right. And there's just so many problems with that. And I guess the last thing I would add there is if you were to look at the determinants of health, which there's a really great picture of this on a website, determinantsofhealth.org, which we can maybe include in the show notes. But I just like the picture because it's this huge pie chart circle with all these tiny words in it. And it's sort of broken up into sections and kind of tells us what are all the things that go into determining a person's quote unquote health. And food and movement is one tiny word on this massive chart. And it's just a really great image to kind of put things into perspective, that things like where we live, our genetics, the type of care we have access to, if we've been victims of things like bias and discrimination, all of these actually have a lot bigger impact on our health than what we're eating.
Yeah. Yes. And also, we don't owe our health to anyone. I think that's important because we don't actually have to be healthy, right? Of course, that could be a value for many people, and that's fine and whatever, because they're choosing that value. But I think we also have this kind of social expectation that everybody has the same value. And if you don't prescribe to this value of health, that makes you, kind of asking for it.
Absolutely. Which is, I think, one of the main things I love about Health at Every Size is that values piece of where is health on your values list? How important is it to you? And you certainly don't owe anybody an explanation. Despite what we do as far as looking at someone and thinking that we somehow have an idea of how quote unquote healthy they are. And then, it just kind of goes in circles.
Yes. So I wrote on social media that you are allowed to enjoy eating comfort foods. You're allowed to enjoy eating. You're allowed to enjoy eating comfort foods. You're allowed to enjoy eating whatever you decide to eat. And I got a response from somebody saying, no, let's not encourage this in people. To which I respond, encourage what? And their response was unhealthy eating. And
I got lots of thoughts.
Right. That I would love to hear, if somebody commented this on your Instagram, how would you have responded to that, Haley?
Yeah, well, I think there's 3 or 4 different ways I'd want to approach this. I think that one of the markers of a healthy relationship with food, using that word lightly, but a functional relationship with food, is the fact that you can use food not only to give your body the nutrients it needs, but to also use food in a way to soothe your body, in addition to whatever other coping skills that you have. Food does taste good. It's supposed to taste good. That's why we have taste buds, or else we would eat the same thing every day. It is tied to memories, and it is at every celebration, and it's how we show love to people that we care deeply about. It's why cultures express themselves through food. So food is not simple. It's complex. There is so much wrapped up in food, and trying to tell ourselves that we shouldn't enjoy that is part of a bigger oppressive system that says, really, we should all just be quiet, sit down. There should be no pleasure in our lives. And it's just wrong. It's just wrong. And, shaming someone for enjoying food if they're not hungry or they just want to eat it, that's never helped anybody take better care of themselves. It doesn't. So, from every angle, it's problematic. It's also pretty healthist. It's also elitist, because you think about what is encouraging unhealthy or overeating. Like you said earlier, what does that actually mean? That's a term that we've sort of created and given a meaning to, that really means something different for everyone. And you have to think about what people have access to as well, not just food security access, but I also mean access to being able to take care of themselves emotionally and their mental health, because a lot of the behaviors that manifest through food are our best attempt to try and regulate our nervous system or take care of ourselves in the moment. And that's never wrong.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I didn't respond to that comment because I didn't have the capacity to.
I don't blame you.
but your response is absolutely perfect, and it's exactly on point with what I would have said. I think, it's hard because our culture has so indoctrinated us to believe that obesity is an epidemic, using the word now that is so prevalent, pandemic, right? Obesity is an epidemic, and it is a measure of health in a society, is how many people are obese in that society. And everything, it is, what am I trying to say? Like every marker is meant to gear us towards decreasing obesity, right? Like that's how you know that you're living in a society that cares for its people, is that you're decreasing obesity. And I think that that's a really interesting, that was the marker that society chose out of all of the markers, right? That's what we chose. Instead of healthcare for every individual, we chose this one thing as if that's the problem, and not, an indication that there's so many other things going on.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's so problematic for many reasons. And one of the very top reasons is just the language itself. I mean, we've created this word that I usually use, if I ever use it, in quotation marks, which is obese.
Yes.
And it is ascribing like pathology and illness to a group of people without any other information other than that's their body size. They automatically have been given and prescribed illness. And then everything else is based off of that, how much they're going to have to pay for their health insurance, for example, or what is going to be denied from them, how they're going to be perceived in a professional setting or just in a coffee shop trying to go find a seat that works for them. So, it's problematic in itself, because there's a lot of people that are in really good health that happen to be in that weight category that have already been pathologized. So, and there's a ton of science that shows how harmful that is for mental and physical health.
Yes.
And that trying to force that body via restriction into a smaller body, more often than not, will lead to weight cycling and weight regain, which has the side effects of that are all the same side effects that people have said and blamed on being in a larger body. So things like hypertension actually come from weight cycling, and on and off dieting kind of thing is what I mean by weight cycling. So just from that aspect of the bias and the discrimination around the language used in that, I mean, we could go off in a whole tangent on that piece, but you make so many other good points, valid points, important points about why are we choosing this to be the sole marker of the health of our society, right?
Yes. Yeah, especially since it's not a useful marker. It doesn't actually say much of anything. It's saying like there's 25% blondes. It's like
it's a bell curve, because people have always existed in smaller, medium, and larger bodies. Like
Right.
it's a bell curve. It was never meant, and that's what it was designed to show. It was never meant to be an indicator of an individual's health.
Right. And so much of our barometer of health is a person who is actually on the lower end of the bell curve spectrum, pathologizing more than half of the population.
Yeah.
I have a client who is pregnant, and as part of her health insurance package, she gets to sit down with a nutritionist. And this client isn't, you know how like I joke with my friends that like everybody who has ever gone through an eating disorder is a nutritionist. Like just by the inherentness of going through this disorder, we become like experts at nutrition. Like I can tell you exactly how many calories are in blah, 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 because that was my obsessive thinking for a long period of time. So she knows everything and everything you need to know about food and exercise. And she has worked really hard to recover from pretty debilitating eating disorders. Anyway, so she goes to this nutritionist, kind of like interested to hear, you know, what this nutritionist has to say. And the nutritionist told her to weigh herself and then told her that she's overweight. And that she needs to be really managing what she eats as she's pregnant because she doesn't want to become obese. And this, first off, you know, her weight isn't the subject of this conversation, but nobody would look at her and think that she is a larger bodied person. All of her weight comes from her muscles because she spends 3-4 hours at a gym every day, right? And then to think of like this expert, this nutritionist who is supposed to be grounded in knowing body and knowing eating disorders and knowing all of the spectrum of this, told oh my gosh, Haley, the rage in me burned so strong. I was so angry because I know that is not a singular experience. And that's the experience that most people experience. Going to nutritionists or going to, I don't even know what a nutritionist is, to be honest, but like going to a person in the healthcare system that is supposed to be helpful. And then they find themselves actually being judged and criticized and told facts that aren't helpful.
Because what this person is going to prescribe then to this woman who is growing a child inside of her is exactly the behaviors that she used in her eating disorder.
Exactly.
Which led to malnutrition.
Yes.
And a poor quality of life.
Yes.
And his life is risking her life. Yes. So that makes sense, not at all. And it is infuriating on so many levels. And I would say to that healthcare professional, if you don't understand eating disorders, the basic understanding of eating disorders and how to treat them, then you need to refer to a specialist who does.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I know one of the things that you've been talking a lot about right now with COVID-19 and quarantine, and I would love to hear more of your thoughts on this on the podcast, right, is the fear of gaining weight. And I know that there's a lot of people who have recovered from eating disorders or recovered from diet culture who are now noticing themselves becoming worried of gaining weight. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, on a systemic level, I mean, I think it's helpful to talk about it on a systemic level and on the individual level. Systemic wise, I mean, it's the perfect opportunity for that system, which we called diet culture, multi-billion-dollar system, to really take advantage of this and use it as a scare tactic that something's going to happen to your body. So buy our product, or, you know, watch our video, or sign up for our classes, or, you know, whatever it is. It's the what they do. They co-opt. It's sneaky. It's gross. The kind of co-opt the health message to get people while they're at their most vulnerable. And so a pandemic's a great time for that, right? And people are afraid for many, many reasons. And on the individual level, what do we do when we're afraid to make ourselves feel okay? We reach for the most tangible thing to again regulate our nervous system or to make us feel safe. For many, many, many people, that is trying to control their body size or what they're eating. And so you see this perfect storm forming, right? You see the fat phobic society, and then you see the individual who is very vulnerable right now and says, yeah, that's a great idea. While I'm at home, I will just work really hard to control my body. And that's what will make everything in this uncertain and terrifying and traumatic time okay. So I get why the individual would do that, right?
Yeah.
I get that. And I understand that. And I also like have compassion for that. And then I'm very, very angry at the weight loss memes and people, you know, talking about the quarantine 15. That angers me so much.
Yeah.
Because this is a life and death situation that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And why are we worried about, you know what, if someone's body, if they came out of this and the worst thing that happened to them is they gained 5 pounds, right. Amazing. That body kept them alive, right?
Yeah. And I think that it's, you know, something that I don't think I see a lot of people talk about, but I've definitely experienced is it is so normal for our weights to fluctuate. It's normal for us to gain, lose, depending on what's happening around us, depending on our you know, a multitude of things can cause us to fluctuate in weight. And that's actually normal, you know, it's like within a certain, what words? I'm trying to use words. Within a certain range, it's normal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. After a while, it becomes weight cycling. And then that's an invitation for us to get curious what's there, because there's probably some diet mentality going on. But to a certain extent, like everyone's weight is going to fluctuate depending on what's happening. And that is our body needing and desiring certain support. And I think that that gets to be something that we can be curious about instead of continually label and judge and demean ourselves for.
I definitely agree with that. It's actually normal up to about 7 to 10 pounds. So in fact, you know, there is when it comes to weight and what is someone's natural weight, we call that a set point weight. And we usually talk about it in about a 10-pound range, because like you said, based on someone's needs or season of life or what they need to do to take care of their body or what their body is doing to take care of them, that weight is going to fluctuate. And in a day, our body fluctuates 5 pounds. Like it just does. That's like a solid bowel movement or something, right? Like
exactly.
So trying to get like this pseudo control over our body size is keeping us from really digging deeper and uncovering the bigger issue of why we're seeking control.
Yeah,
and that's hard to believe. And I also think this is a good opportunity, which I probably should have done earlier in the show before talking about weight and bodies, but just to acknowledge, you know, the privileges that I hold in talking about this, in that I'm a white, straight size, able-bodied, cis-het woman. And so I get that those inform my perspective, but I also work off of the lived experience of all of my clients in many different sizes and bodies and experiences. So just wanted to own that as we're kind of talking about weight here.
Yeah, that's important. And something that you wrote that I want to read because it's so good on this topic. You wrote, bodies change. Bodies change as a result of trauma, change in schedule/routine, as we age, as we heal, and for so many other reasons. Part of having a healthy relationship with food in your body is being able to care for your body as it changes. Diet culture tells us to do everything we can to prevent these changes, as if our body is plastic that we can mold into whatever shape we want. We are actual humans, though. If your body happens to change during a quarantine, it could be because of stress, the response to scarcity, self-soothing, and trying the best it can to keep you safe. I want to be very clear that I'm not minimizing the fear of your body changing. It's very real fear for many people in recovery. What I'm hoping to do with this post is to make folks, including clinicians, think before they post their workouts to Instagram stories, post about foods that are best for preventing weight gain and other BS nonsense that is highly triggering for those of us who are just trying to survive right now. No, those who are, which is all of us. I love that. I think that that's really an important message. I think it's very hard sometimes to really discern and sit with what is true for us versus what we've been taught. And I have so much empathy for all of us who are navigating this, because it's really hard to take a stand for something that goes so against the cultural norm.
It's so hard. And then you have to bring in body privilege or any type of privilege here, because for some of us, we have a little bit easier time with that, based on like the things I just mentioned about my privilege that I hold.
Yeah.
And for others, they're facing this going out in the same world. Like they leave their dietitian or their therapist's office, and as they're healing from this trauma, and then they go out in the same world that has been harmful to them over and over, based on their size or their race or whatever it might be. So I think it's just incredibly hard, like you said.
Yeah. And like weight stigma in the medical profession is killing people.
Literally killing
people. Like I've been dealing with some health issues over the past year, and not a single doctor has looked at me and said, well, if you lose the weight, and so they've been able to then go one step deeper. And I know that is a privilege that a lot of people don't have that experience. And instead their experience is, you need to lose weight. And if you lost weight, this wouldn't be happening. And sometimes it may have to do with the weight. Most of the times it probably doesn't have to do with the weight. And the fact that, people are so quick to label and judge and to decide that that's what it is instead of getting deeper, curious, that is killing people more so than pretty much any other ism out there, which is really heartbreaking.
I'm so sorry that's been your experience. And I know you're not alone. And I know many of your listeners have definitely experienced something like that. And it's absolutely unethical. It is so harmful and unsafe. Even if, which this is a big if, because it's usually not the case, that something about their health has to do with their weight, shaming and blaming is not going to make them, it's not going to fix them.
Yeah.
It's not going to improve their health. And why would we set them up for weight cycling? And the failure rate of dieting or intentional weight loss is super high, like higher than 95%. So why would that be our intervention? Can you imagine a physician prescribing a medication with that type of failure rate? Like that would be unheard of. And so why would we not, even if it was their weight, just focus on the behaviors they actually have control over and give them the support that they need?
Yeah. And so for people who are struggling right now around, all of the fear of gaining weight, not because, not because of diet culture, but because they're trying to untangle from diet culture, what words would you have for them?
Gosh, I'd have a lot of words. I would first and foremost want to just validate that struggle and make sure that they know that they're not broken, that they've not done anything wrong, and that their body is a worthy body right now today, just like it is. That there's nothing in the world that they have to do to earn any more worthiness. And I know that's something you talk a lot about. Mm-hmm. And that how we feel in our body at any one moment is based and formed upon a lot of different things that are happening to us. And that perspective, which is body image, can change minute to minute, day to day. It's impermanent. And there's lots that, in kind of digging into that, all the things that influence our body image and how we're feeling in our body, I think that's where the work is digging deep into that and understanding that a bit more. But on a more surface level, kind of more things that are probably accessible to people right now is to stay in contact with other people. So if they have a therapist, if they have a dietitian, if they have people that they talk to regularly, to continue to be connected. Connection is so important. Yeah. It's really, really, really important. And I think we have to evolve with the times and everything that's going on. And routine and loose structure is also really important right now to keep yourself a bit, tethered and oriented.
Yeah. I think, the quicker we can notice that the thought isn't the thought that we want to have, right? That it's an indoctrination, that it's not our thought, the more space we have to then decide, how we want to relate to that thought.
Yep.
And I think that that's really, really important to just become aware of when the thought of there's something wrong with my body or I feel ugly et cetera, pop up, because that is an indication that there's probably something deeper going on, that has nothing to do with our
Totally.
bodies, and it's a distraction. It's something we know how to control.
Yeah. Oh, I so agree with that. And that actually goes nicely with one of my favorite um, treatment modalities. I only bring that up because I know you'll be really familiar with it, most likely. It's ACT. So acceptance and commitment therapy, and really just trying to decide, notice and be curious about the thoughts that come up. You can watch them come, you can watch them go. And instead of trying to figure out, well, where's the truth, or how do I reframe this? It's simple. Is this helpful for me right now, or is it not? Can I let it go?
Yeah.
And that sort of goes along with that. And I love that. Like, is this helpful or not? If it's not helpful, like, all right, bye. Thank you,
Right.
brain. Thank you for that. But no.
Yeah. 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 We, may not be able to control necessarily the thoughts that come up, but we can certainly explore how we want to react to those thoughts, and how we want to proceed with those thoughts.
Very true.
Yeah. So, in alignment with this, I have seen a lot of increase in symptoms of people wanting to engage in disordered eating, diet culture, mentality. I've seen, a lot of people doing workouts from home, or not, of course, that there's any problem in that, but doing it out of like a compulsive fear of gaining weight, or feeling like now is the time to lose the weight, now is the time to do that thing that they've always wanted to do. And I would love your thoughts on, how to navigate that.
Yeah. I think, again, circling back to something we were saying earlier, like, what is the intention behind that, or the purpose, or the reason that might be popping up, or your old eating disorder thoughts, or current eating disorder thoughts being stronger or louder than normal, and putting a name to that and saying, like, this is, again, me trying to regulate. This is me trying to feel safe and protect myself. I think that in itself is helpful, so that we're not shamey around it.
Yeah.
But, for those who have less awareness around that, and are starting to notice it, or maybe they're listening to what we're talking about and thinking, oh my gosh, that's what's happening for me. One idea is to take a little bit of time and reflect back on where dieting and controlling your body size and cutting out food groups, or whatever it might be, where has that taken you in the past? How has that served you? How long did it last? What did it bring you? And kind of go over that history for yourself. Because I think what you might find, what happens when I do this with a lot of my clients, is that it just never actually served them long term like they thought. It might have been something in the moment that temporarily like reduced their anxiety.
Right.
But there was always backlash. There was always something, usually a little bit more chaotic, to follow. So not eating enough food, not sleeping enough, those are things that heighten anxiety and negative body thoughts. So, usually they start to see the increased anxiety and the desire for more of this control, and it sort of spirals from there. So looking at that history, I think, can be really telling.
Yes. Yeah, I recently read a statistic that 42% of people who engage in gym activities are doing it from a disordered space, which I actually was surprised that number was so low. I expected it to be higher, but it is one of those things that people don't often talk about, because everyone is the culture has moved a lot towards the conversation of movement, right? Move your body, move your body. The best way to deal with stress is to move your body, move your body. And it's very
normalized.
It is very normalized, and it has become more so, like, even the more extremes version of quote unquote movement, going to the gym, hardcore workouts, cycling, spinning, the Peloton, it has become so accessible for people to obsess over the gym as their way of managing stress. But then at what point does it become compulsive and then, problematic?
Yeah. And I think you would have to think about kind of the definition of dieting as you're evaluating this for yourself. Like, is this something I'm doing to take care of myself, or is this under the influence of diet culture? And we would call the definition of dieting eating or moving your body for the purpose of weight or body control versus nourishment and satisfaction, or anything like eating or physical activity where the primary purpose is to intentionally manipulate body weight or shape. And so if you're doing this for an aesthetics reason, possibly, the nourishment's going to take a back seat, right?
Yeah.
So it's something to tease apart. I mean, it's different for everyone. And I'm with you. I'm surprised that percent's not actually higher. But I also think it's hard to get an accurate number, like kind of what you were alluding to, because we don't really have a good shared definition or understanding of like what would be compulsive and what isn't, because of the muddy waters there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that definition of diet because I think it's really amazing that it includes movement. And I think also, if our only way of reducing stress is through movement, then we need to reevaluate our kind of ableist lens, because then what we're implying is that people who can't move their bodies for a variety of ways have no other means of alleviating stress.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And that is not, again, that is a lens that says that one body is the ideal body, and everyone else's body needs to look like that in order for it to be considered healthy.
At the expense of anything, right? Because it would cost. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is an excellent point. It's absolutely true.
What have you been seeing in your work over the past few weeks?
It's interesting. I've seen that I have a perspective from the clinician side, since I supervise and mentor clinicians, and I also have perspective from the client side. On the client side, I've seen, primarily working with people who have clinical eating disorders, I've seen kind of two camps. I've seen those who this has been a push to, for whatever reason, probably based on a whole lot of factors, where they're at in their recovery, kind of how long they've been in recovery, a bunch of different factors. This has actually pushed them to be more resilient than I've ever seen them. And it's incredible. It's really fascinating, actually. And then I have a bunch of people who are suffering immensely, and it is sort of heightened their, people with eating disorders, people suffering with an eating disorder. It is very, very, very common to have a co-occurring mental health. Well, I guess an eating disorder is a mental health disorder as well, but a co-occurring mental health disorder. So I've seen this totally wreck their OCD, or their anxiety, or their depression, or, whatever else they're battling at the same time. It's just incredibly unfair and painful. And, we've had to reevaluate expectations of recovery and what that's looking like, what our work looks like together, what we need the most right now. And so I've kind of seen both of those things with folks in recovery. And then clinician-wise, it's interesting. I am very much a person that likes to meet with people in person. And I've had a handful of virtual clients for a while, but shifting our entire practice, myself and all the clinicians at my practice, completely virtual right now has been interesting. You don't realize how much you rely on, and I know this from my training, I do rely on the energy in the room and the subtle shifts in emotion and feeling and things that are going on in our session, but did not realize how much I really rely on it. It's very hard over a computer screen for those things, so had to do some adjusting there as well.
Yes, it is. It has been very interesting. I do therapy at a community mental health clinic, and then I have done my coaching virtually. And so it has been really interesting to see the difference between my coaching clients that I've been seeing only virtually and the changes there, and then shifting all of my one-on-one therapy clients virtually and the shift there. There's definitely been a lot of adjustments, and I think it's very we live in a very fortunate time where we get to make these adjustments, where we have the technology that can support this type of work, even if it is virtually. But there is also a mourning. There's also a loss of what we had and not knowing when we're going to have it back. And I think that that's a really valid thing to mourn.
There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of different types of grief and layers to grief. And what is so fascinating about a pandemic is just how far reaching into every facet of every person's life. It's wow. I think we are going to gather quite a bit of information from this pandemic, not just as clinicians and practitioners, but the whole entire world.
Yeah. And I hear
grief. Yeah.
And I hear, there was an article I read the other day that the next pandemic after this one is going to be a mental health crisis, which I couldn't agree more. And I think that is something that we all have to prepare for.
Yeah, I'm here to prepare for that. I'm here to prepare, not for kind of full circle back to what you were saying about how our society measures health and sort of everything based on body size. I want to create a world where everyone has support for their mental and physical health, nutritional health outside of what a body looks like or is capable of doing. Yes. I don't want to get to the next pandemic and every meme that pops up is about fear of weight gain. I don't want to be in that world.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. This has been such a beautiful conversation, Haley. I love your passion, your commitment to this work. I know that you have worked really hard to be able to spread the message as wide and to do the one-on-one work that is so, so important. So I really appreciate you. I appreciate your work. I appreciate your message. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Gosh, thank you for the kind words. I'm sitting here nodding my head, thinking all of the same things about you. I've known you for a while, Thais, and you've been a massive influence on me spreading my wings and getting to where I am today, like massive influence. You've sort of been there since the beginning. So I actually was just kind of reflecting as you were saying that on actually how far we both have come. And it's just a really beautiful thing to look back on. So for that, I'm really grateful to you.
Really beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I'm just so glad that you invited me on the show. We got to talk a little bit, and I get to spend some time with your audience. So
yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you for listening to Reclaim the Podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Thais Guy and her guests to the show. The content of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder.